first as a worker advocate in negotiating contracts, and then later administering unions, where I was negotiating contracts with my staff. So I was on the other side of the equation as well. And I can tell you, there's nothing that evokes more passion than benefits at the bargaining table, more so than money even. Somebody can always match the wage offer, but the benefits create a lot. As a worker advocate in negotiation. And so Dave and Gerard are here to talk about a very interesting way they approached the benefits for employees, UFCW members over at Dierbergs. They have asked, that you please feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions during their presentation. You can put them in the chat box if you don't want to interrupt their flow, and we can read them into as well. But they really want this to be a conversation. And so they would really like you to participate as well. So with that, I will stop and let Gerard start the presentation. Thank you, gentlemen.
Sure. Dave and I talked about this, and first of all, thanks for having us. We're both, thrilled to be able to share with you our experiences and our journey, together. We're both very happy with where we are today and feel very proud with what we've created for our participants and our associates. So thank you for letting us share that today with you. We definitely, as Doug had said, would like to have this be as conversational as possible. To that end, we intentionally didn't really prepare a PowerPoint because we wanted this to just be, just more of a sit-down conversation. And so maybe to start that off, what I'll do is just tell you from Dierbergs' perspective, where did this start, and why did we all of a sudden, come to Dave and say, we really want to pursue something different? And I'm going to go back to, Dave, I think it maybe was, I'm going to guess somewhere in the 2016-ish time frame, give or take a year or so, that we Dierbergs really started watching our withdrawal liability getting larger and larger and larger in our plans, not just 655. We really felt that there has to be a better way. There has to be a better mousetrap. There's got to be something better that we can do, because every time that withdrawal liability would go up and start to increase.
Gerard, you just muted yourself.
All right, I don't know how that happened. Okay. So inevitably, when that withdrawal liability starts going up, then your contributions can start going up. And from our perspective, if we're going to put more into a plan, we want our associates to get more out of it. We don't want to have to put more in the plan just because we didn't hit a target or the market dropped or whatever have you. So Dierbergs started by getting together with the principals at Shop and Save and Schnucks, who were the other two major employers in the 655 plan. And we did all have an interest in moving forward and an interest in trying to find that better solution. And so we jointly started becoming educated. We started working with different actuarial firms to understand what other options are out there besides the traditional defined benefit plan.
And Gerard, I just want to mention, I want to be clear that at that point in time, we were all three companies and union communicating. So it wasn't just the companies having a conversation. They were coming to the union saying, listen, we need to think about benefits in the future. This may be an unsustainable model. Are you open to having this conversation? So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I want to be clear that this wasn't the three companies saying, let's get together and go talk to Dave. When we get done, it was, let's get together and have an open conversation from day one. Because at that meeting, that early on meeting, every company and the union had time to hire their own professionals aside and apart from the fund professionals that we have all the time. So we have our actuaries, we have our legal counsel, but I know Schnuck, I know Dierbergs, I know Shop and Save, and I know Local 655. We all had, that room was full of smart people, that multiple meetings, that it was like, let's all talk about this collaboratively. So I had my own actuary, I had my own legal counsel besides the funds. Just want to chime in on that, Gerard.
No, I think that's a great point, Dave, because it was very collaborative from the very beginning. You know, and hats off to Dave and his team for being open, because that was that was the key, Dave, is that, you know, we had a desire to pursue it. And you know, Dave never said, well, sure, whatever you want to do. But what he did express to us was an openness to say, yeah, you know what, I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to discuss. And so,
But I think you would admit it was a very guarded openness on my part. I'm being
that's
honest.
yep, I agree.
I was, I'm
Yep.
not gonna say I was skeptical, but I was concerned about the unknown. Let me say that.
Yeah. And so I think what started panning out for us at Dierbergs in this collaborative effort was a couple things. One, when you're working in a multi-employer plan and you're trying to make change, you can only move at the speed that your other partners want to move at. And so what is a high priority and a burning desire for Dierbergs may or may not be for the other employers. And so that was one thing that started becoming bogged down. And that's not a criticism of the other companies, because every company has their own set of priorities and what's big for their business and what's going on and what's important for them at that time. And if it doesn't align, you start stagnating. And so we certainly had concerns about the stagnation that we felt we were starting to get to, where things just weren't moving. And then I think the other thing is that, and this is another, you know, big hurdle to come over, is that different companies have a different willingness to finance and pay for that change. So no different than in a defined benefit plan, where if you decide that your interest rate is at 7.5 and you want to buy it down to 7, that requires an investment of cash from all of the employers to buy that down. Well, some may not want to do that. And in our case, I don't want to get off track, but that was definitely the case there with that plan, with our what I call our legacy plan. So it was also a case in that by changing, there are certain costs you got to withdraw. You've got to, I mean, there are costs to incur, and there's withdrawal liabilities to pay out, and the willingness of, you know, frankly, the other two participants in the plan, two employers in the plan, to go down that path to the degree that Dierbergs wanted to go, it wasn't aligning up. And so we had to decide on our own that, okay, if we can't get 655 legacy plan to go together, then maybe this is something we just need to go on our own. And so that's where we decided, Dierbergs decided, and I think, help refresh my memory, Dave, did we come to, I'm pretty sure we came to you at that time and said, listen, we can't get everyone together. So
yeah, I think it was 2018 or 2019. And it was about 3 years after that first big meeting with everybody. We were about a year ahead of bargaining, if I'm not mistaken, Gerard.
Yeah.
When your company asked for a meeting with myself, and you were upfront that, hey, this is going to be a very heavy conversation. We want to talk about figuring out a pathway for retirement benefits in the future that doesn't include your legacy plan. So, and let me say, when I received that phone call from my labor relations partner, who I have a great relationship with, I swallowed it extremely hard, because I knew at that point, if they had already done enough homework, they weren't going to have a meeting with me to just say, do you have any thoughts? I knew the Dierbergs company and Gerard and everybody over there good enough to know they were going to come in with a thought process and a game plan to move this agenda forward. So again, I assembled my team of professionals to meet at Dierbergs, and I just don't remember if that was 18 or 19. I know this, we were a year of working together. Once we agreed that we could collaboratively come up with a thought process on future benefits. And I think that was the first hurdle, Gerard. I don't want to speak for you, but from my perspective, it was, can we come up with a benefit package that A, the company can finance, which is very important, but B, that I'm comfortable with, because it's kind of an unknown benefit structure to present to my members out there. Once we've locked ourselves in a room for a long period of time and kind of figured out, because I'll be honest, Dierbergs came in and said, we want to do a 401k. And I said, I can't do that. They came in with a couple of other game plans. They didn't come in with blank chalkboard. They came in with a lot of different thoughts before we ever landed on what we finally came to, and we'll get to that here directly. Once we came to that, though, we had to then partner, and that's Dierbergs and Local 655, on what does an exit of Dierbergs from the legacy plan look like? Because now I have a fiduciary responsibility to protect the legacy plan while also trying to work with one of my major employers. That was about a year. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gerard. Was close to a year?
Yeah, we started probably in late. I'm sorry, go ahead, Doug.
Like I said, a quick question for both of you. Dave, I think, Dave, you made a very clear point about Dierbergs came to you at least a year or more before negotiations were to have started. Do you think you would have had this kind of success if they had waited until negotiations started, or it was starting this conversation that far in advance critical to being able to?
Would have never happened. Would have never happened if we'd have waited for bargaining to get to the table. I am telling you, when Gerard and I say it was a year of coming up with a thought process and then an exit, I'm not saying we started and we didn't see. We met at least twice a month. We were meeting, heavy conversations with a lot of smart professionals in the room to navigate the game plan. So I think that's a great point, Doug, that this is, if you're going to tackle a complex conversation like this, you have to give yourself time and you have to build in timelines. And Gerard,
the bigger the change, the more time is needed to get comfortable.
Yeah, and you have to have somebody keeping score. And by keeping score, it's like, where do we need to be on what date? We basically at some point wrote a calendar, correct, Gerard, about here's what has to happen.
Yeah.
Guys, if we can't hit this benchmark, we're not going to be able to move this across the finish line. And both sides were extremely diligent in working the calendar and moving the project forward.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, Dave. I mean, there's a significant amount of planning, and to Dave's point, a couple of times a month, you go, oh, it's just a couple of meetings a month. There was so much work going on both sides, because I know, Dave, you invested a ton of time as well in this, that in between those meetings, there was a ton of work that was being done so that next meeting could be more productive. But we did also back into, our timeline. As Dave said, we'd look at it and say, okay, when does the vote have to take place? When does the withdrawal have to take place? And we identified those final end milestones, and then with the help of our professionals, we marched that back and said, okay, we got to have some decisions by these dates. And that really helped keep us, I think, focused on trying to hit those major milestones. But it was, to Dave's point, we did go through tons of different iterations, and I don't think every bit of that year was needed. In fact, I would tell you that was a crunch. I mean, it was getting hot and heavy when we got to like the September timeframe, August timeframe. We were all on pins and needles going all the way through the end of the year, and Dierbergs was able to get the financing together to get that withdrawal liability paid, I think, on December 29th. So it was literally down to the wire. But we did come through with several iterations after we got Dave comfortable that this was something that we could do alone, that we could do it without the other two big employers from our plan, and that we did want to make sure that legacy plan was protected. Those are our employees. Those are our associates.
I want to compliment Gerard and the Dierbergs family for that point right there, and I want to be clear about that. They didn't come to the table and say, how do we get out of this legacy and take care of ourselves going forward? There was never a meeting we had where they weren't consciously aware of what they were doing and the effect that would have on the legacy plan. Not that they give a crap about the other employers. I'm just being honest here. It's not the other employers they were in there with, but you know what? They have workers that have been contributing for 40, 42, 44, 30 plus years. If they didn't do this properly, all of those people's retirements could be in despair. So to Gerard's point and the company's point, they sold me on this with their commitment to their workers and to their growth. If I can just talk for a second on that, Gerard, if you don't mind. I shared this with Doug and Matt beforehand, and Gerard and I talked about it last night. This company had not opened a new store in the St. Louis market since I think 2012. Am I correct, Gerard?
That's right.
We're talking about this in 2019. This is a company that should have been expanding. They were at the pinnacle time to be expanding in this market, and they were stagnant for 9 years. I can tell you from my side, and I know Gerard knows this better than my side, if you get a company to a certain size and you stop growing, you will either die or grow. At 9 years, I had in the back of my mind, this is not good for Dierbergs Markets long term. The company made a commitment to me that you have got to find us a way to let us grow. And here's what Gerard and his team came in, and this is what hit me over the head and made it very clear to me. They said, so you want us to go build a new store in your market, and we're going to leverage multi-million dollars in debt to build a new location. When we open that store, our percentage of the legacy fund liabilities automatically goes up. So what you're telling us is go borrow a couple of $1 million, and your reward for that, Mr. Dierbergs and Bava, is you're going to have a couple $1 million of extra liability day one on that legacy pension plan. And Greg Dierberg, Gerard Bava, Laura Dierberg, the whole team said, we're going to make a commitment to you that we would never open another store with this legacy plan. But if you find a way to move forward with something other than a legacy liability, we will commit to move forward with additional growth. Gerard, you've got 2 of them open already, and you're looking at more. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, and you're exactly right, Dave. It is definitely, as I mentioned earlier, it's that anchor around your neck. And there are so many things that have changed. The grocery industry changes constantly, and you constantly have to be able to adapt and then be able to build out these locations and acquire new locations. It takes a lot of capital, and to be fighting the headwind of that legacy plan as big as it was it was just too much. It didn't make any sense. And I, Dave, I want to emphasize that I don't want anyone to think or hear what Dave said and think, oh, so they came to you and laid the hammer down and kind of threatened. That it was a very frank conversation of, we can't grow, and we aren't going to be able to grow and open stores unless we can figure this thing out. Absolutely.
I would agree with that. There was never, I'm not going to say there wasn't emotional, passionate conversations, because there was.
There were.
Yeah, this is a hot topic issue. I mean, I know that Greg Dierbergs took his toys and went home on more than one occasion, and Dave Cook took his toys and went home on more than one occasion, understanding that it was a matter of breathing and understanding that we're talking about millions of dollars of investment from the Dierbergs family, from their perspective. And from my perspective, it is introducing a benefit plan that had never been done before, because truly what we crafted here, and I know Gerard and I would take a lot of credit. We think we're the smartest 2 guys in the room besides the professionals, but we really spent a lot of time looking at what different variable pension plan designs were. And I know Gerard prided himself, and I pride myself on, we think we've developed as good a plan as there is out there today. Gerard was mentioning this yesterday to me. Our legacy plan, we had to hit 7.5%. That was our rate. And a lot of people on the call here from the labor side, you're probably at the same situation. It's 7, 7.25, 7.5 that you have to hit, or you're going backwards. And Gerard said it earlier. They don't mind adding money and cost, but God, they don't want to add cost to break even, and for their employees to just maintain the same benefit. I mean, that's maddening.
Tell us about the new plan, and did the new plan replace the legacy plan, or is the legacy plan going to be there for those people who, like Dave said, who have been there for 35, 40 years?
Yeah, so what we did, Doug, was we worked together to protect the legacy plan as best we could, and we withdrew. So we are out of that legacy 655 plan, but we paid what I believe to be a very reasonable, well, I'll say this, and I don't think this is going too far. We effectively endowed our annual contributions
Yep.
in perpetuity.
Yep.
Okay, the confidential piece is what the interest rate was. But the concept is that we all came to an agreement on that interest rate, and the amount of money that we paid, if invested appropriately, would yield our contributions in perpetuity.
Yep.
And
No 20-year quarterly payments. It was basically that legacy fund should be receiving those quarterly payments in perpetuity off of the amount that Dierbergs said we're willing to invest. But understand there is no comebacks.
right. And so that was in exchange for a waiver of liability going forward, so that because we just didn't want to be clawed back in. Because now, quite frankly, with one of the large employers exiting the market, the local 655 legacy plan is primarily one employer. That's it, for all intents. I mean, there's other small ones, so it's still technically a multi-employer plan, but it's one employer, and we did not want to be liable for the potential for mismanagement of that plan coming back on Dierbergs. Not that the union would do that, but you never know. So what we then set us forward doing was trying to come up with, as Dave alluded to, a new variable plan that would be sustainable for Dierbergs into the future, but also sustainable in that it provided a solid benefit, and in the case of what we come up with, a better benefit for our associates at the same cost. And I think that the first thing you got to tackle when you do the variable plan is there going to be floors and ceilings and things like that. And that's where we really started becoming creative, because the standard debate is going to be employer wants floors. I'm sorry, employer wants ceilings. The union wants a floor. Employer doesn't want a floor. Union doesn't want a ceiling. And so if you can't get past that, boy, that's a tough hurdle to not get over. And so
I'm going to just chime in that there wasn't many times that there was a passion. We're not open for discussion. The Dierberg family made it very, very clear there would not be a floor. And I don't know if you know what a floor means. That means that irregardless what the market is, they would guarantee a benefit level at, let's say, a 3% return, for example, or 2%. That means that theoretically, as unlikely as it is, Dierbergs could, or any employer could, have a liability in the future. That's the one time that Dierbergs family came and it was like, this is not open for debate. We are not going to have a floor and have a liability after writing a check like that and getting out of this to eliminate liability so we can grow. Would you agree, Gerard? That was one time you guys were pretty much assholeish. And I mean that with respect. It's like, listen, we can't do this.
Yeah. And the reason is, to your point, Dave, is that we wanted a plan that we could count on that had no liability. We have no liability in the future for how this plan performs. It doesn't mean that we didn't want a solid plan for our associates. We did. We just needed to get away from this liability. It's too onerous for companies to deal with. It just is. And so that was one of the big hurdles to get by. And so it really goes down the path of all these different decisions to make. But I would tell you that that where we landed, and Dave, you tell me, do you want to kind of describe the plan? You want me to keep going, or
go? You're spot on.
So I would tell you that we set a limit. A contribution level, and that's where we got the actuaries involved. We kind of came to an agreement actually on what that contribution per hour would be. And then we worked with the actuaries to say, all right, what kind of a benefit can we come up with that? And so just laying it out, there is no floor, there is no ceiling. The hurdle rate is 5.25%. Any earnings that go over 5.25% go 75% to the benefits and 25% to what we call a stabilization reserve, which I'll get to in a second. So if we achieve a 6.25% instead of the 5.25%, then 75 basis points or 3/4 of that percent goes to enhance benefits. And by enhanced benefits, I just mean a greater pension benefit, not a change of benefits, just a greater benefit.
Let me just chime in real quick, because the other thing we did, we lined up the benefit levels similar, no, not similar, exactly like the legacy.
Yes.
So if you worked X amount of hours in the legacy, or you worked X amount in this VAP, and on flat returns, you got the same benefit, irregardless from plan to plan. So keep in mind that when Gerard says you have a 5 1/4, anything above a 5 1/4 year over year means you're actually going to have a higher benefit in this new plan than the old, but the base level benefits are the same in both plans. I just want to mention that.
No, I'm glad you did, Dave. That's a great point, because we really, all of us really wanted that benefit. We Dierbergs did not, and clearly the union would not allow us to introduce a plan that was in any way, shape, or form less than what they had today. That wasn't going to happen. We didn't want it to happen, but clearly Dave would not have allowed that to happen. And so with that joint goal in mind, we were able to work through quite a few things. But so to Dave's point, it is a better return to the extent that we can exceed 5 1/4. Now, last year was a bad year. There was no floor. So the benefit levels will be down when the actuarial reports come out. But here's the thing, and this is, again, some of the things that we worked together on to make each other comfortable. Dave was like, all right, no floor, but I need something to protect my members from a downfall if they're getting ready to retire and we have a 2008 event and the market just collapses, and then they're sitting there facing retirement with a huge reduction in their benefits. So we came up with the stabilization reserve. We determined that there would be some pre-funding to this stabilization reserve that the employer, we Dierbergs, contributed to over 3 years. And the purpose of that reserve is to supplement or to really keep a high water level on everyone's benefits. So if in retirement, and it's only for retirees that this supplements. So if in retirement we have a bad year and someone's benefit would drop, the stabilization reserve will kick in and keep them at their current benefit level. And so it's kind of like a high water market. You won't go, once you retire, you won't go below that retirement benefit, and you can only go up as we exceed 5 1/4%. And so with the change with the way that we funded the stabilization reserve, not only in the beginning, but then with 25% of all the excess earnings over 5 1/4 going into the reserve, and working with our actuaries, we feel very comfortable that we have funded that reserve to adequately cover the benefits in the event of a huge market downturn. And it's not just
quite honestly, improve benefits in the future, which the legacy plan would have never had. I am absolutely convinced that maybe not today and maybe not in 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, but there is going to be a point in time when that stabilization reserve fund is going to be so well funded that we're going to be able to start ticking those benefits for retirees up. And that's the one thing everybody on the call is probably aware of. Typically speaking, in a Taft-Hartley benefit fund, what you retire with is what you retire with. You don't get increases going forward. And that's why I think we've spent a lot of time saying no floor, more ceiling, no ceiling. How do we find a way to increase benefits going forward? And I think that's the one thing this plan does that a lot of the variables we've looked at didn't do. I think this one is built and structured in a way, and Gerard, disagree or jump in. It's structured in a way that we should, with reasonable returns, be able to improve benefits for retirees in the future. Because if you think about it, the typical market return basically is 7% year over year. If you look at a long-term 10, 15, 20-year return, if we annualize 7%, we have reserves going into that stabilization year after year to build that. I didn't mean to jump in, but that's one of the things we're really proud about, is being able to possibly improve retiree benefits once they retire.
And a quick question, Gerard, you're painting a very flattering picture, and for this new plan. But I've got to be the devil's advocate here. Is management in this plan as well?
Management of the store?
Of the store.
Yeah, all the way up to the store director, because the store director, and I'm not an expert at this, Dave, but correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe the store director is in the bargaining group.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So so that's the only level at store level that's not in this group. right?
That's
Yeah.
correct. Yep.
So, so going back to the stabilization reserve, it is, we believe that if managed properly, will be there, as Dave said, for years and years to be able to handle it. Because when you have a downturn and you're retired, it's not just, let's say that you drop 20% in 1 year and the next year you come back and make 10. I haven't made it back yet. So I not only have to make up those benefits in that first year, but I got to keep making up those benefits with the stabilization reserve until those returns surpass that 20% and make it up. So it's not just a one-time hit. And so the actuaries have taken all that into consideration and gotten us very comfortable with that. And so that was so I would say that coming up with the right hurdle rate, coming up with the stabilization reserve. And I thought there was another thing, Dave, that was unique that we had done with this plan that I'm trying to.
I think the other unique thing you touched on already is the true no floor, no cap, no ceiling. And that is, I don't know that there's another. We may have the only one like that right now. Let me say that.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, there is a floor and there is a ceiling. And the other thing is, though, that when you have a floor and a ceiling, you're not going to generally fund the stabilization reserve at the same level. Because in those, you usually have a range of, if you get between 4 and 7, nothing happens to your benefits and nothing goes to the reserve, and you're assuming some liability to the employer. With ours, we truly believe, because we were able to agree, I'm not going to stick you with liability. You're not going to ever hold back any of my gains. I get all of my gains for my workers. Those should benefit the benefit accruals going forward in the way of the stabilization reserve.
Yeah.
Now, Gerard and I have a disagreement of opinion here, and I hope I'm right, and he hopes I'm right. But our goal is, although he's not convinced it's going to happen, is that at some point in time, in 10 to 15 years, and I'll be long gone, or maybe 20 years, that stabilization reserve could become so big.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, if it's sitting there and you're 15, 20% overfunded in that, and you're earning, you get a 10% or a 12% return, and there's no liability on it. At some point in time, my hope and my goal, and he's not convinced, but he'd like to see it happen, is that we can actually increase benefits, period, even for current employees.
And I'd love to see that. I really would. Just so that everybody knows, that reserve is tracked separately from all the benefits. So it grows as the fund grows, and it falls as the fund falls. So it is its own separate, chunk of money. The other thing, Dave, that I wanted to mention, and I remembered, that I think is unique, is that we came to a point in the discussion where we came back to the contribution level. And we knew that the contribution level was set, and we were trying to negotiate through what do we think the expenses are going to be, and so on and so forth, and where, when we cost out the plan at the current level of benefits that the old plan has, how much is that going to cost? Where's our contribution level? And what was happening, kind of for the most part, is that it was really, really close. We were cutting it really close to the contribution level. And so my concern conservatively was that I didn't want to be in a position where our contributions ended up not funding the benefit, and then therefore we're back in the situation where we got liability. Dave obviously wants to make sure that all the money that we contribute goes towards benefits as much as possible. So what we decided was that, and this is really interesting, it really didn't come from the professionals. This is with Dave and I and others just sitting around, all right, well, how can we get by this? And just thinking outside the box. And we kind of threw it out to the professionals. Well, wait a minute. What if we do make the plan cost less than the contribution limit, but then every couple of years we will evaluate and we'll take that excess and we will send it out to everybody's benefit account. I don't know what to call it other than that, but to their benefits as a one-time, increase. And so what it allows us to do is we kind of work through both of our concerns by saying, look, let's not make it that way. Let's not take that risk. But hey, every penny you get.
Gerard made it palatable for me to budget more money towards administrative expenses than I would have been willing to do. understanding that if we don't use it, I get it back. It's all, it's all mine. So we have a vested interest going forward to try to hold down administrative costs. But it made me comfortable saying, I don't think we need 9 cents a freaking hour on administrative costs, Gerard. Jesus, we can get by with 8. And then Gerard says, well, we get by with 8. And what if we overrun and now we have a liability and you're coming back to be needing more money? This was a perfect way of us wrapping our heads. Good point, Gerard. I completely forgot about that. But every penny gets reallocated out after X amount of years to bring us back down to net neutral.
Yeah. And so, and we were very happy. I'm sorry.
It sounds like both of you are reinforcing a point I used to make all the time, that it's important to have somebody in the room who says, but why do we always do it that way? You have to have that person who says, the outside the box needs to be outside the box in conversation, because otherwise the box never changes. And
I will tell you
both for emphasizing that point.
I will tell you, we pushed our professionals on a regular basis to a very uncomfortable level. What Gerard just explained to you, that was definitely driven by Gerard. And I'm not going to say you were the sole creator, but that was one of your main thoughts. You were one of the brain trust of that. And professionals weren't comfortable with it. They'd never done it.
Right. And
there was a lot of stuff
to get a competitive advantage, between Dierbergs or UFCW. This truly was in the spirit of collaboration, saying we need to get outside the box so we can understand what the box looks like.
It was enjoyable for me to watch the professionals scratch their head when we were on these calls, because truly we were saying we don't want your box. We appreciate the table, but we're going to build our own box on top of it. So whether it was we're not going to have a floor, we're not going to have a ceiling. And by the way, we think rather than waiting till you get here, a lot of these variables will say everything goes to the participant until you get to, let's say, 7%. And then everything above 7 or 8% goes to the reserve at that point in time. And it's like, well, that's fine and dandy, but you don't get that many years of getting over 8% or 9% to fully fund that. And that's how you can get yourself in trouble. We were creative, and it was partially mine, but everybody reminded.
That was all you.
No, it is a partnership. It was collaborative, right? It was collaboration that everything above 5 1/4 gets split 75-25. And that was a long process to get there. But once again, it was, hey, wait a second, I don't want to do this, but can you do that? And let's run the numbers. Let's have the professionals look at this. It was a very difficult process. I can tell you from my perspective, I'll let Gerard speak. I believe we have a better relationship between the employer and the union today than we've ever had. And Dierbergs has always been a good employer. I got to tell you, I don't know that I go 2 or 3 weeks without a phone call from one of the owners, if for nothing but to touch base. That didn't happen before. Just didn't happen. Wasn't a bad relationship. It just wasn't at this level of trust and confidence in each other's vested interest.
Yeah, that trust is a big deal, Dave, and to not have that, I can't imagine if we wouldn't have established it. Now, let's be real. I think in the very beginning that was guarded.
Oh
no, but over the process, it really did build, and I think what made it successful was the listening, right? The trust and going, okay, I know Dave's not being unreasonable. There's got to be something he's trying to get at here, and I'm not understanding it. So let me just kind of stop and try to understand, what that is. And so I think that trust, that mutual trust both ways, was huge. And without it, I don't think you accomplish this type of thing, this kind of big change.
I want to also mention, you have to be willing to not get everything you want. Because I can tell you that, let's talk about when we got to the end of the world here, the end of the game, Gerard. It was, now we need to select our professionals. Listen, I had my list of professionals. I can tell you right now, Gerard had his list of professionals, and they weren't the same. So how do you, it's like, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. And Gerard's like, well, yeah, but I'm comfortable over here, here, and here. To set our personal preferences aside, saying, all right, how are we going to come up with the professional team that, Gerard, you can live with and that I can live with?
Right.
It doesn't sound like much, but just even those little nuances were, everything was a test of each other's commitment to get the process done.
Yeah, it took, I mean, just to negotiate the withdrawal was all of 2019. That whole year of trying to figure out, and to negotiate the contribution rate. We didn't have a plan laid out. We knew that it was enough to cover the benefits that we wanted to match from the old plan, but it took all of 2020, and even to some extent, we're still doing it today because there's one piece, the stabilization reserve, we haven't created a policy around, and it's 2023. But it was all of 20 for us to get the details of the plan hammered out, to argue about or debate, whatever, about the no floor, no ceiling, to establish the 5 1/4, to come up with the 25-75 split, to do the rebate that we were just talking about. I mean, all of that took place grueling through 2020.
Oh, and by the way, then you get to write a plan document that captures all of this.
Right.
I mean, and you have professionals doing that, but trust me, when you're writing something that is this creative and different, that was a process in and of itself, because they're writing a plan document that doesn't look like one they've written before in a lot of areas.
Right. And that complicates things. They have to research it. And then, inevitably to send it back out and have everyone read it. It's like, no, that's not how I remember it, or that's not what my interpretation was. So the documentation coming out is not the end of it. It's just the beginning. So I would tell you at the end of the day, the one last thing that I would touch on is that I thought was another big kind of hurdle for us to work through is asset allocation, and how aggressive and how passive or conservative that we wanted to be with these investments. And while again, we have the same goal in mind, we may not be on the same page there. And so that was not the easiest of things for us to accomplish either, because, from an employer standpoint, I don't want to be, and I'm exaggerating to make the point here, I don't want to be at 5 1/4. That's not enough. That's too conservative for me. I know that might make it and everything's fine and good, but the whole purpose of putting this plan is that I want to juice this thing, and I want to see what this thing can do. And Dave's like, hold on a minute. I don't want to do 10% and have huge valleys and peaks and so forth. And so there's some give and take that we've got to do. And that was not a quick and easy path either. Dave?
No, I would agree. I mean, the one thing I'll say is the way this came together, I think both sides have become more trusting and confident in the other one's desire and passion for the outcome. So that if we were going to tackle some of these issues like you just talked about early on, I think it would have been even more difficult. But I think through the entire process of, wait a second, Dierbergs really is trying to do the right thing here. They care about their employees' past retirement, and they care about their future one. I start trusting that and respecting that. They start trusting that I'm not trying to take advantage of them. I'm trying to find a pathway to let them grow and expand. The more we did together, the more confidence we had in each other's thought process. I don't want to mislead, and I don't want to say that when Gerard said something, it's like, okay, I agree with Gerard, but it was, okay, Gerard has that thought process, and it's not to be devious. It's not to be disingenuous. It's because this is where he's at. So I need to figure out, he has no ill feelings here. If that's where he's at, how do I move him? And he did the same thing with me. If that's where Dave's at, there's a reason. Why is he there? It doesn't make sense. Let me walk him back over here.
And when we understand, I mean, that's when we got creative. That's when the creativity started flowing, because when I understood what Dave wanted to achieve, I could sit there and go, okay, I understand that. Let me figure out how can we get there a different way. And likewise, the same thing with Dave. And I really think that's where all the creativity, stemmed from there.
Well, and if I could jump you to the end, Dave, I'm kind of curious as to, this is a culture change for your membership, and ultimately, all the goodwill that, was built between the Dierberg family, Gerard, your bargaining team, would be for naught if the membership didn't ratify the agreement. How difficult was that? Did you do a lot of informational meetings progressively to keep the membership informed as to how this was coming up? Because this is culture change. I mean, can you talk a little bit about how you prepared the soil for planting the seed for this kind of change?
So yeah, we started the communication process day one. That listen, you understand that your retirement benefits may look different, but understand we are working with your company to ensure your past pension and your future pension. I had a couple of really big telephone conference calls where I would be hosting the entire membership and they could ask any question. The good news is, and Gerard could do the same thing, we've been doing this so long and building this ourselves. I can tell you right now, you could ask me any question you wanted, and you could, Gerard or myself, quite honestly, and a gentleman from across river in 881, any one of the three of us, I'm comfortable could have answered damn near any question, like an actuary, like an attorney, only understandable, because we just were so involved in it. If you can stand in front of your employees, or in my case, my membership,
Yep.
and not have a book in front of me and say, let me get back with you. It's, you ask me a question, I give you an answer. And I've got the answer to every question you've got. And by the way, at the end of the day, if we hit a 5 1/4, you're going to get the same benefit you had before. And folks, if we only hit a 5 1/4 in the legacy, your pension is going to be gone. If we hit a 7 1/2 in this one, in the old one, you just got what you had coming. In this one, you'll be reaping the benefits of that at retirement. So it was an education process. I think that, to Dierbergs' credit, their employees had a trust for their ownership to begin with. I want to be clear. They're not an anti-worker ownership, and that makes a big difference,
It
right?
does. Yes, it does.
And I've been, you know, you can see by my hair, I'm an old guy. I've been in leadership with this local union and I've worked for the local for 37 years on staff. I've been the president now for I don't know how long, 12 years, and treasurer before that. So I had a trust with the membership to begin with. So with management being respectful of their employees and their employees trusting them to begin with, and having stable local leadership that is trusted, that made it much more palatable and believe. I'm not saying everybody clicked their heels, because I'm sure you guys heard it at the main office, as I did, concern, but we were able to tamp that down just because of what I just outlined.
Yeah, and I think when the members or our associates are hearing the same story from both sides, that's key. So, you know, Dave would be having his communication, we would be sending out ours, but we also did it, if I remember correctly, Dave, we coordinated that.
Absolutely. We never sent something out, or you didn't send something out without the other side knowing what it was, when it was going out, and if we wanted to do something in collaboration. There was never anything. There's no solos on this.
No, and there weren't any times that you know, either one of us went rogue.
No.
and communicated something that was to their own benefit and the you know, the harm of the other. And that's big, because that can happen.
Well, now I want to ask you, Gerard, another kind of a bringing it to full circle type of a question. This new plan has been in place for what, a couple of years now, or have you seen its impact in any way in how you are retaining staff or recruiting staff? Is it starting to show a benefit in that in those arenas as well?
So, you know, conceptually, Doug, you'd like to think so. What's hard right now in our environment, in our landscape, and I mean collectively, not just grocery, but everybody, is that we all started struggling with finding talent to begin with. And so it's really hard to judge right now, and I'm not trying to skate the question, but it's hard to judge what impact that has had, given that we're struggling to get people, you know, in any way. But I would tell you, and Dave, I don't know, you know, your perspective on this. I don't know for sure, but it seems like our associates are more focused on today and what am I getting today? They want to know about the future. And again, Dave, if I'm wrong on this, please chime in. But it's a challenge because we've had such a challenge with wages in general. and what we've had to pay and how we've increased and so forth, to be able to be competitive. It's hard to judge what's important right now. Is it that pay level that I'm getting, or is it also the future benefits that I'm going to get, and what's more important?
I think you're spot on, but let me answer it this way to Doug, because I am freaking petrified about what's going to happen in 10 years to this organization when Dierbergs retirees are at a function with Schnook retirees, and the Dierberg retirees are making, I'm not, you can laugh, Gerard, but I've had this conversation. I am convinced the way we have this plan structured, at some point in time, my Dierberg retirees are going to have a higher benefit level and get an annual increase from time to time, and my Schnooks aren't. And how the leadership of this organization is going to be able to explain to the Schnook people, which is the majority of my membership, this is your benefit, and that's all it is. And your wife that retired with the same amount of years from Dierbergs is now making $10, $20, $100 a month more off of their pension. So I don't know about retention today. I can tell you long term, I have concerns in a good way, if that makes sense.
Well, and some of the people who are attending the program here have heard me talk before about anchor benefits. And pensions certainly are one of those anchor benefits that, early in the last century, they were created to keep employees from job hopping.
Right.
And then in the last century, we kind of devalued the some of those pension plans, replaced them with 401ks, and now employees are job hopping, and employers are going, well, how come they're hopping jobs? Well, I think a plan like this, and it may be too early yet to tell, and that's fair observation, Gerard. But I think a plan like this may provide some of that stability once again. It certainly gives somebody pause to think about, like I said at the beginning, somebody else can offer you the same money or more money, but offering the same benefit, that's like trying to find a used car with the same options.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I agree.
I had two questions.
Sure.
What was the transition for people who were close to retirement? Did they have the option to opt into the variable plan or the legacy plan, or was everyone that was still employed transitioned to the variable plan? That was question one.
So one of 20, is that correct, Gerard?
20, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
One of 20, everybody moved. But their benefits for those people getting close to retirement were frozen. So it wouldn't have had much of a difference. What we've had to date, Gerard, correct me if I'm wrong, most of the people that are retiring right now, the overwhelming 30 plus years of benefits are in the legacy. So they have a monthly annuity coming there. Because you're only talking about a year or two of benefits under the new plan, what they're looking at is a lump sum one-time cash out, because it's under that value of 5,000 or 7,000, whatever that is. So I gotta be honest with you, the Dierbergs people actually like that, because they get their retirement monthly annuity from the legacy. And what we're finding is people are saying, yeah, give me that lump sum. I like that, right? Gerard, will you agree?
And I think that's another interesting point where we've collaborated together on that is recognizing the importance of that annuity that comes in retirement for someone, and balancing that against this lump sum concept, and we're in that process right now. That's another thing that we're still kind of trying to work through, is what's that level going to be, especially with the new changes that came that raised it from 5 to 7.
What's the balance? What's right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, but I think everyone understood that and felt good about that, Matt, in terms of that transition.
Okay, because I know that can sometimes be a challenging transition. Other question was, are there some other maybe intended or unintended benefits that you've seen? We talked about it has impact worker retention, which sound like it's too early to say for sure. Has it helped the company grow or membership grow or anything like that as a result of this change?
Well, I'll take the growth of the company, and then Dave, if you want to take the rest of it. The growth of the company, without that, with us being able to look toward the future and see on the horizon that we've got no more unknown liability lurking out there, and we can look at the plan and go, okay, we're set with this piece. Now let's look forward with that doubt out of the way. It has cleared the way for us to open a store this past, it was November of 21.
Yes.
We opened our first store since 2012. And then we're opening our second new store in late March, in another month, little over a month. And there are other locations that we have that we will be growing into for sure in the next 2 years. So that has really alleviated a lot of doubt from our growth plan. Dave?
No, I would agree. I kind of touched on that earlier, Matt, is without this plan, Dierbergs would be 2 stores less than they are right now. I'd have less members I'm representing there. And there'd be no opportunity for growth. Was there something else in that question, or did Gerard capture it?
I think you got the majority of it. I guess were some of the other benefits that came out of,
I mean,
positive.
to me, the biggest benefit is I have an employer that's allowed to grow. And I am convinced in my mind, if this had not happened, I'm not sure if Dierbergs would still be in St. Louis operating in 5 or 10 years. You cannot hamstring an employer and not let them grow. If they can't grow and spread that cost over more locations, at some point in time, the CFO is going to tell me it doesn't make sense to operate any longer. So long-term, I think I've secured the future employment of my workers there.
And Dave, has it had an impact at all on the legacy plan and your dealings with the other employer that's in that plan? Has it helped in any way there? Is that a hidden benefit at all, or no?
So, yeah, I think that's a good point. Because of Dierbergs' willingness to basically in perpetuity put enough money in to have a quarterly, the same concept as a quarterly payment, even though it's already in there. It has been good for that plan. I will tell you, from a timing standpoint, when we got that lump sum check, the market's been on a pretty good track since 2008 until this last year. We actually said we're not going to do what happened to Central States. We're not going to put it all in the market at one time and take a chance on that market dipping or something else happening. We had decided we'd do 1/8 increments in. So we'd put it in an annuity, and every quarter we would invest 1/8 of it until we were 2 years in. We did that, and we were going to use some of that to pay some benefits. We did that, and lo and behold, if you look at shortly after that, there is a 1/4 massive dip in the markets. And we were able to invest about a little over half of the total lump sum when the market took a huge dip. We bought extremely cheap. The trustees said we don't want to time the market, but now would be the time. So there's been a huge benefit to the legacy plan. We are still in extremely good financial shape today, even with the market correction over a lot of other funds because of that.
And Jeremy Poor put a question in the chat. Jeremy's with IBW Local 1439. And Jeremy asked why this plan versus pursuing a more traditional cash balance pension plan.
I'm trying to remember, and Dave, I don't know if this is ringing a bell with you. I know we looked at a cash balance plan, and I don't remember the specifics as to why this was better. I honestly don't. All I can tell you is, and this sounds like a kind of an avoiding answer, but I know that we evaluated that. We evaluated every single plan out there in terms of structure, and this was the one that for us seemed to be the most beneficial. And I know that's not really answering your question, but I can't remember why we ruled out the cash balance. I'm sorry.
I can't either. I don't even remember what side it was or if it was both, but we had the conversation about cash balance because we had the evergreen cash balance 401k. We just had a multitude, and I remember having conversations. I don't remember what side it was, but I think at the end it was like, yeah, both sides agreed that's not where we want to be. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what the reasoning was. I apologize also.
Thanks for asking the question, Jeremy. Are there any other questions? And by the way, gentlemen, Gerard, David, I've loved having this conversation. And Matt, we need to think about doing more conversations like this and less PowerPoints. This has been fascinating just to have a conversation with the two of you. If there's not any other questions, we are right at 1 o'clock. I do want to thank you all for joining us. I